I was not allowed to defend myself or say whether or not I was guilty of this allegation or indeed what I was alleged to have done. I'm Miriam Cates, presenter for GBNews, just come off air from Good Afternoon Britain, and we've been talking about this story about Elon Musk and Twitter, or X as it's now known, and its role in a so-called misinformation. Now, of course, this is the story that the chair of the Science and Technology Committee in the House of Commons, so she's a Labour MP called Chi Anwora, has asked Elon Musk if he will come and sit in front of that committee of MPs and answer questions about the role of X, or Twitter as it used to be known, in the riots back in the summer. Now, of course, it's still unclear exactly how those riots were started, but there certainly seem to have been some rumours, some which may have been true, some which weren't so true, that started online following those tragic stabbings in Southport. And as you know, there were those riots across the country, some of which ended in some arrests and indeed people being put into prison. Now, the role of social media in those riots has been closely looked at. Now, of course, we must say that whatever you read on social media, there is absolutely no excuse for breaking the law. But nevertheless, clearly a lot of communication did happen through those platforms. And so the question we need to ask is it in the interest of free speech to be able to say whatever you want on Twitter or any other social media platform, with or without declaring your identity? So if you've got an anonymous account, is that what free speech really means? Or should there be some form of regulation of these platforms? Now, of course, the free speech absolutists would say that there should be absolutely no government interference in platforms like X, that citizens should be able to say whatever they like without any censorship from the government. And of course, that is a very, very important point. Governments should not be in the business of policing people's opinions or shutting down any particular political point of view. That is what authoritarian regimes do, and we absolutely do not want that in this country. On the other hand, we have to acknowledge that social media and the internet has completely changed the face of free speech in this country. If you go back 30 years before social media, free speech meant being able to stand up in your local pub, in your local social club, at your local school and say what you thought. Now, you might say something completely stupid, something that really offends people, but the number of people that you would reach would be very small. And actually, if you did offend people, you probably wouldn't be invited back to that pub or that community centre. The world of Twitter is completely different. You can say what you like, that's for sure, but you don't face any responsibility for that because you are speaking to an audience of potentially millions of people who may not know who you are. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to say what you think, but we need to question whether or not a world in which people don't take responsibility for what they think, what they say, but can speak to millions of people at a time is a kind of healthy situation that we want. So I think that instead of cracking down on free speech or introducing rules about what you should or shouldn't be able to say, we need to try and put into the internet the kind of responsibility that people take in their ordinary lives. And when we're talking to people that we know, when we're talking to friends or colleagues or the people that employ us, we do temper what we say because we do care about offending people. We do care what people think about us. But that just doesn't happen on Twitter. And that has led to this kind of unhealthy atmosphere where people do feel free to say whatever they like. In some ways a good thing, but sometimes can spread lies and misinformation that can be dangerous. Now, I had an experience of this a couple of years ago. I used to be a member of Parliament. I was investigated by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, and he alleged that I had brought Parliament into disrepute. And this allegation was made against me across all the mainstream media. It was a headline news one day in December a couple of years ago, and I was not allowed to defend myself or say whether or not I was guilty of this allegation or indeed what I was alleged to have done. But on Twitter, people started speculating that I had taken Russian money, that I'd abused my staff, making all kinds of allegations against me that had, in some instances, hundreds of thousands of views. Now, that seriously damaged my reputation, my ability to do my job. And when I was cleared of the allegations, of course, that was not news and there was no comments made on Twitter. So that's the kind of example where it's very easy to destroy somebody's reputation, to spread complete lies about somebody without any consequence. Whereas the mainstream media, the legacy media, if you like, our print media, channels like GBNews, absolutely don't make those kind of allegations without having substantial proof. That doesn't matter on X. So my personal view is that we should be allowed to say whatever we want on Twitter, anywhere else, but with the caveat that you take responsibility for your speech. And if you do spread false information, if you are guilty of lies, if you are guilty of libeling someone, you should face the full force of the law. On Good Afternoon Britain today, we interviewed Benedict Spence, who is a political commentator, and he made the point that Britain and the EU have this tendency to just want to regulate American tech companies like X rather than creating their own. And I think that's a very good point. Yes, of course, in Britain and Europe, we should be concerned about the influence of foreign-owned companies. But one of the answers to that would be to set up our own social media companies to allow that kind of innovation in the UK, to, yes, regulate it sensitively to make sure that free speech is protected, but that people can't spread lies and destroy people's reputations without good cause. But it does call into question why we don't innovate in that way in the UK, and why some of our best technological brains do actually leave this country and go to America, where there does seem to be a much more entrepreneurial culture around tech. Back to America, Elon Musk has hit back at British MPs who have been threatening to summon him to this country for his social media platform's alleged role during the summer riots.
Well, as part of an inquiry into how AI is being used, peculiar, Labour MP and committee chair Chi Onwara has called on the Tesla owner, SpaceX owner and X owner to explain his alleged promotion of pure disinformation.
Well, Musk responded, saying he will make sure British MPs are summoned to the United States to explain their censorship and threats to American citizens.
Oh, good. Everyone's getting extradited. Well, joining us now is the political commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, do you think any of this is actually going to happen?
I'd be surprised, actually, if Elon Musk, if he bothered actually to turn up to the UK, if this was what he was going to be asked about. And I think what I would say is it speaks to where Britain is at politically, that the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Commons might decide to call upon a man who, as we speak, is involved in implanting chips in people's brains, is involved in producing better internet access for people in war-torn Ukraine than you can currently get in central London, not to mention, of course, single-handedly competing with China's electric vehicle industry and taking us to Mars. What the Science and Technology Committee wants to talk to him about is nothing to do with any of that. They want to talk to him about hate speech and misinformation and how AI can be used basically to disseminate things that they don't like, if that even is what's going on. Now, of course, it's not just going to be X that they're focusing on. They're going to be looking at Meta's various platforms. Presumably, they're going to be talking to Google. Presumably, they might manage to get somebody from TikTok with any say over these things. But as I say, I think it's just tremendously frustrating to think Britain, in a real moment of economic and technological stagnation, is focusing so much on misinformation and hate speech rather than getting us to Mars, or how to use AI to solve problems in, say, the health sector. You'd have thought a first world country might be interested in that, but no, we're going to be doing grandstanding about nasty words.
Well, Benedict, of course, that is an absolutely excellent point, and that puts in context the very significant achievement of Elon Musk. But nevertheless, is it not an important point that some of these platforms, none of which are owned in the UK, now have enormous influence, and the idea that they are somehow neutral or their owners are neutral is just not true? Should we not be worried by the kind of power and control that these big tech companies have, even if we happen to agree with the politics of some of their owners?
The same can be said for any media platform, frankly. We have newspapers, we have television channels, we have websites, all of which are owned by foreign interests or even domestic ones who have political agendas. That's not new. It shouldn't be controversial. Not everything can be the BBC, and thank heavens for that. But again, it's the reality of the situation is Britain is not interested in pursuing its own sort of sector of creating startups, creating its own social media platforms, creating its own AI. It's simply interested in regulating the stuff that's being facilitated elsewhere. And this is where, in many ways, of course, it hasn't really, even though we've left the European Union, mentally, we're still chained to it. We're still in that mindset where you think, as long as I can just regulate something, and if it still doesn't do what I want it to do, I'll just regulate it even harder. And eventually, these people living in the world superpower, they must bend to what I say because this is Britain and it's the year 2024. That's not the way that the world works. And I just sort of think, look, if you want skin in the game, have skin in the game. Actually facilitate facilitate your own social media companies, facilitate your own free speech platforms, and then actually people might start paying attention to you, rather than what is currently going on, which is that the UK issues these sort of diktats, much in the way of the European Union does the same, and American politicians and billionaires laugh at us and they go, haha, that place where they all stab each other and where everybody's getting really poor, we don't care.
No, it's fascinating, that sort of reputation that this part of the world is getting, not just this country, but Europe in general. Watching one of these new promotional videos for OpenAI and their products, it was fascinating to me hearing all of the engineers promoting their product. How many of them had French accents, Italian accents, Spanish accents, British accents? And you think, hang on, all of these people are living in California. Yeah. They're not making things in Europe. They're not making things in Britain. All of our brightest and best minds, particularly people who are good at coding and tech, go across to the United States. And it's easy to see why. They're a pro-growth society, whereas we, as you've been saying, Benedict, just sort of, we see success and we want to cut it down. We want to level down, to regulate. That is all we have time for. But Benedict Spence, thanks indeed for joining us, political commentator there.
Social media is an incredible invention, and it has opened up our worlds in ways that our parents and grandparents just couldn't have imagined. The kind of people we can connect with, the things that we can learn are absolutely incredible. But there is a dark side to social media in terms of the lies that can be spread, in terms of the damage that can be done to people's reputation, in terms of the dark side of human nature that it too often brings out. And I don't think we've reached the point yet where we've managed to translate our centuries-old rules and expectations around how we treat each other in the public sphere onto social media. I think it's high time we do that for the protection of our children, for the protection of our politics. I don't think censorship is the way forward. I think the way forward is for people to take responsibility for what they say, and we need to find the kind of structures that will encourage that.